For decades, Judge Meredith Langford sat high on her judicial throne, untouchable, unchallenged, and feared. Attorneys whispered about her in courthouse hallways, her name synonymous with rulings that bent justice to her will. Defendants, especially those who didn't fit her vision of deserving citizens, knew their fate was often sealed before a single argument was made. But one fateful trial changed everything. A defense attorney with a plan. Darnell Hayes wasn't just another attorney. He was a man on a mission. With nearly 2 decades of legal experience, he had defended the wrongly accused, fought for justice where it had been denied, and taken on cases that others deemed unwinnable. But today was different. Today, he wasn't just defending his client, he was taking a stand against a system rigged from the start. His client, Tyrone Wilkes, had been accused of armed robbery. The evidence was flimsy, the witnesses uncertain, yet the case had been fast-tracked to trial. Darnell knew why. Judge Langford had seen to it. She had a history of bias, a pattern impossible to prove in a single case, but undeniable when examined across dozens. And Darnell had been examining for years. A courtroom like no other. From the moment he stepped into Langford's courtroom, Darnell could feel the weight of her disdain. She barely glanced at him over her reading glasses as she delivered a thinly veiled warning. "Mr. Hayes, you are already on thin ice in my courtroom. Don't waste my time." Darnell didn't flinch. "I'll try not to, Your Honor." The trial proceeded, but it was more of a scripted performance than a legal proceeding. Every objection Darnell raised was dismissed. Every questionable move by the prosecution was ignored. The jury noticed. The reporters in the gallery noticed. But Langford didn't care. She had spent years bending the courtroom to her will, and today would be no different. But today, she was wrong. The moment everything changed. Darnell was meticulous. He had waited for the perfect moment, knowing that Langford's arrogance would eventually betray her. When the prosecution introduced undisclosed evidence, a clear violation of legal protocol, he seized his opportunity. "Your Honor, this is a direct violation of Brady v. Maryland. I move for an immediate mistrial." Langford barely looked up. "Denied." Darnell let the silence hang in the air. Then, he asked again, ensuring the entire courtroom heard. "To be clear, Your Honor, you are refusing to acknowledge a Brady violation?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I said denied." And then, just as Darnell had expected, the doors of the courtroom burst open. Justice walks in. 2 federal agents entered the room, their presence shifting the entire atmosphere. The murmurs in the gallery grew into a low rumble. Langford straightened in her chair, her irritation flashing into something that looked dangerously close to fear. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. One of the agents stepped forward, flashing a badge. "Judge Meredith Langford, we need to speak with you immediately." Langford's fingers curled around the edges of her bench. "I am in the middle of a trial." The agent was unfazed. "This is a matter of federal interest. It cannot wait." A ripple of shock ran through the room. The jury, the attorneys, even the courtroom staff all exchanged glances. The power dynamics had shifted in an instant. Langford scoffed. "We are not taking a recess. The defense has wasted enough of this court's time." The agent cut her off. "Judge Langford, we have a warrant for your arrest." A collective gasp spread through the courtroom. Langford's face drained of color. For the first time in 24 years, she had lost control. Darnell watched her, waiting for her eyes to meet his. And when they did, he delivered the words he had waited so long to say. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm, steady, and unwavering, "I believe you just denied my motion for a mistrial. But it seems this trial is now the least of your concerns. A reckoning long overdue." The lead agent stepped forward, reading the charges aloud. Meredith Langford, you are under arrest for multiple violations of the Civil Rights Act, bribery, obstruction of justice, and abuse of judicial power. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped in disbelief. Others muttered in satisfaction. The jury sat frozen, their eyes bouncing between Langford and Darnell. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every detail of a moment no one had seen coming. Langford turned to Darnell, her voice a sharp whisper. "You did this." Darnell didn't look away. "This is justice." The agents cuffed her hands, and for the first time, she stood in the very spot where she had condemned countless others. A courtroom officer, one who had worked under her for years, held the door open for her. Langford hesitated, then stepped through. The doors slammed shut behind her. Just like that, she was gone. A system still broken. The room was left in stunned silence. The power that had loomed over it for so long had vanished in an instant. But for Darnell, the fight wasn't over. His client, Tyrone Wilkes, was still in handcuffs. He turned to the new judge, a man rushed in from another courtroom to take over the proceedings. "Your Honor," Darnell began, "given the recent developments, I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client." The new judge studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I agree. The charges against Tyrone Wilkes are dismissed. Bailiff, remove his restraints." A breath of relief swept through the room. Tyrone let out a shaky exhale as the handcuffs fell away. He looked at Darnell, disbelief and gratitude in his eyes. "I thought people like her never paid for what they did," Tyrone muttered. Darnell glanced at the empty judge's bench. "They do. Eventually." But as he stepped out of the courtroom, he knew this was only the beginning. Langford was gone, but the system that had protected her for so long remained. And until it changed, his work wasn't finished. Because there were more Langfords out there. And he wasn't done yet.